Good night, and I warmly welcome you all to episode 9 of the 45 show. And to the Norwegian viewers and listeners, welcome to 45 Podcastin'. So, this is now the third live broadcast that I'm trying to handle, and yeah, it's a bit of a learning curve, but it's actually getting better and better. And then there's this whole situation with Rumble Studio, which offers this free live streaming version. I mean, considering the fact that it's free, it's great. I have seen that the other live episodes are coming out okay, so I can't complain on Rumble when it's free and all. It's a little bit clumsy, I still think, but now it should be okay. The settings manages themselves or something. But now the setting should be fine. The setting would not change to say public. However, I found a workaround to force the setting going from private to public. Because if it's set as private, then it's not really live, it's just me watching the stream. I guess that's just how it goes. So I did a half-hour pre-show, partly because of that, in case of technical issues, learning from earlier live streams. I set aside half an hour as a pre-show, so I have some time. But anyway, the real show begins when NASA's broadcast starts in 30 minutes. You can see NASA's live stream here. That's the one I'm going to be following. This is the broadcast I'm going to follow. And then comment and translate to Norwegian. But NASA won't get started with their broadcast for another 30 minutes or so, midnight Norwegian time. Until then, we'll have this pre-show. It is a show, sort of, but we must not forget that it is in the context of head biotech. And then I have to say to all the new ones who have seen the headline to the stream, I just have to warn you a little that this stream is quite a niche angle on NASA and the Artemis 2 mission. Hence, if you're only interested in astrophysics, or whatever it may be, and you just want to get the actual splashdown and only focus on that, then I would actually recommend you should just go somewhere else, quite simply, or just go directly to NASA right away. But don't misunderstand, I am definitely going to follow the splashdown. I am going to follow the splashdown by following the NASA live broadcast. I'm going to follow NASA and translate into Norwegian and comment, but it's just the way I'm going to angle it. The angle will always be in head biotech's perspective. That takes a little time to understand. This is episode 9, so I almost have to refer you back to the pilot episode of the podcast, because in the pilot episode, I spend an entire hour explaining the background to the special angle. Alright, let's see now. Yeah, so I was thinking I'd get a bit of a fire going in the fireplace and things like that. I'm not sure if it makes a huge difference, but I always try to do something a little bit new things every single episode, so it doesn't get too boring. But for those of you who might be following the podcast, or perhaps watched it before, you'll definitely recognize the same effects from before here in the studio. Actually, there's one important practical thing I forgot, and that is the podcast is now available for listening as an audio podcast on both Apple and Spotify. And I never really considered that at the very beginning. My only thought was to put out a live stream of the Artemis 2 launch on YouTube. That's how it all began. But then, the first Artemis 2 launch on February 8th, it was postponed for 8 weeks. And so, it ended up that I created an episode to provide background information on NASA. And then eventually, I just thought, okay, I'll make a podcast out of it. And that's what it has become now. Now it's going to be a season of 10 episodes. So now, this is what we're doing. Originally, this was supposed to be episode 8 on the video podcast. But for the new audio podcast, on Spotify and Apple, handling these longer live broadcasts is a challenge. The normal 45-minute episodes, the 45-minute long episodes, they can be easily uploaded to Spotify and Apple for listening podcasts, but not when the files become bigger, like when they go into 3 hours. Then I must split the episodes in 2 to upload them without issues. So, I must cut the live stream episodes up into 2 separate pieces, and that's why the confusion. On the podcast you are listening to right now, this is episode 9, because the previous one, episode 7, it got split into 2 separate parts, 7 plus 8, so I have no other choice but to call the original episode 7 for episode 7 plus 8 on Spotify. So, I'll have to split this particular stream into 2 parts on the listening podcast. Then this will become episode 9, and the next part later tonight will be episode 10. Yeah, I'll split them all in 2, just like I've done with the audio episodes. So the live stream episodes of Artemis 2, starting from episode 7, will last for approximately an hour and a quarter, instead of closer to 3 hours, so that the video episodes also will be called 7, 8, 9, and 10. I truly hope you all managed to understand that, but I really can't spend much more time on it now. But those of you who were interested in the topic, you certainly got it. So, here in the studio, I've prepared a little something. What do you all think this could possibly be? Can you guess what this could be? I also showed it the last episode. Then I had the egg in my hand demonstrating, but it was a bit cumbersome. However, I thought using the egg last time worked really well actually, but it became so cumbersome to keep holding it in my hand, so I just made a string and then I taped it, so now it's always hanging about 60 centimeters from the globe. But I think it's good to have this model here, and that's how the approximate scale between the Earth and Moon should be in real life. It's nice when I'm going to explain something and things like that. Yes, and so, then we have the egg right here, and in this scenario, the egg is representing the moon, and it's positioned right here now, about 60 centimeters away from the globe. So I just wanted to say this now, simply to help put everything into a clearer perspective for you. The Artemis program's ultimate goal is to travel to and settle on Mars. And if Mars, the actual planet Mars, were to be represented in this model here, then it would have to be further away. Right here, Earth is 60 centimeters from the Moon in this scale, but Mars would have to be another 350 meters further away. That's like way down at the grocery store. And then you can just imagine how much more complicated the journey to Mars is, or at least how much more time-consuming it will be. So we can discuss that a bit, but if we just scale things down, considering the distance, then you'll see this is the Moon. Mars, in that same scale, would be hanging 350 meters away. That tells you a bit about how far away Mars really is. And then we'll have to keep a bit of an eye on the clock, so yeah, there are still 20 minutes left until NASA begins their broadcast from USA. When NASA's live stream starts, then we'll be discussing the splashdown. Regarding the Artemis program, then, when I have this model right here now, the Artemis 2 mission was kicked off with the first live stream in episode 6. If I recall correctly, wasn't it April 1st? Yes, it was. That truly was the big day for humanity, wasn't it? That's when it all began, when our journey to conquer the universe began. Episode 6 was done in grand style in the studio. It was a marathon stream, so that day became truly historic for me. I ended up spending 21 hours here in the studio, so it really was quite something. That live stream also included that whole thing about me having a fancy dinner and all that, but I don't think that was the right thing to do. I'll never do that again, to put it that way. But I did it because that launching day was so special. And that's also why I don't edit that stream video. I just put the clips out as raw, unedited historic footage, exactly as it was that night and day. On that launching day, April 1st, we were here in Florida. If you take a look at the globe right here, you will see that Florida is located here. Well, I'm wondering if I should just turn off that so-called fireplace, because it's making such a noise. So, now everyone knows the fireplace wasn't real. The Artemis 2 mission actually began in Florida on the 1st of April, when the rocket launch was supposed to take place. That's when it was based in Florida, but NASA is actually based in 3 distinct locations. There are 3 primary locations. One is when there are launches, that's in Florida. This is the Kennedy Space Center, located in Florida. That's where we were on April 1st, filming the rocket and keeping NASA's live broadcast running the entire time. Let's see if you could just excuse me. Yes, that's the microphone right there. My very best friend. Everyone who watched the marathon broadcast, you certainly understand. That was from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. That's where they launch rockets from. And you'll surely recall when I showed you those NASA live images of the rocket throughout the entire night, right up until the sun came up. That was right from the launching pad in Florida, but now it's splashed down in the water outside California. So today the main place is NASA's main control center. It's called the Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. And all of those who have seen that movie, Apollo 13.
As a film, Apollo 13 could be quite interesting to see, especially now, because that's something we're all a bit familiar with now, isn't it? Oh, it's going up there around the moon and all those things. Now, those of you who are familiar with this now, but Apollo 13, those Apollo missions, they actually landed on the moon. So that was quite a different situation. They orbited multiple times around the moon, waiting while a separate module landing on the surface. The orbiting spacecraft sent down 2 persons. Then there were 2 left waiting in the orbiting craft. Artemis 4 will do the same in 2028. So 2 astronauts is left in the main vessel. So the main vessel goes into orbit around the moon, and then they send down a small landing module with 2 people. Those 2 are the ones who walk around on the moon. Well, exactly in detail how it all works, I don't really know. Like I said, I'm telling you, I'm no specialist on this stuff. I'm not even really interested in it to begin with. My perspective is head biotech, just so that's said, to make sure if there are any real specialists watching, they've probably already started to wonder now. But the thing that's really important to know is in that movie, Apollo 13, they also had to make the same trip this Artemis 2 mission has been on, because Apollo 13 had to abort their mission. So they were being forced to use the slingshot maneuver, that they leveraged the moon's gravitational force to be flung back to Earth. Because that's what the Artemis 2 rocket just did. It just went in one orbit around the moon, didn't it? And that's actually when they say that famous line, Houston, we have a problem. That's such a classic phrase, and that's exactly there they are, based at the Johnson Space Center. That's where the Mission Control Center is located, and it's also where the astronauts train, and it's the headquarters for manned spaceflight in the USA. That's probably from where we see these these pictures from NASA offices. A lot of it is from there. When we see these so-called control rooms and things like that, they are located in Houston, Texas, so it's located here somewhere. However, tonight they are going to land off the coast of California, so just outside of San Diego, just so we have an idea of where we are located. California, close to Los Angeles, by the way. That's what we're waiting for right now, the splashdown off the coast of California. Well, let's say now it's approximately 15 minutes until NASA's broadcast. When his NASA broadcast begins, I make sure to follow it, and when there's something important I believe Norwegian viewers should know about, I translate it into Norwegian. As I always say, this live stream is astrophysics for the common person, you might say, or actually it's not really for ordinary people either. When you get to the biological aspect, the Fermi paradox, the so-called NASA curse, and the approach theory, no, it's then definitely not for ordinary people. Before I start, I can just show you some of my education. I kind of have it lying around in my studio. For example, right here, you see, it's my Master of Science in Bioinformatics from Stockholm University with an average grade of B or 2.0 in the old system. And then I have a diploma hanging right here from NTNU, and also a Master of Science in Molecular Medicine. It's hanging just outside the camera's view, approximately 2.0 average there as well. And there's a specific reason why I've got all these books and diploma stuff here in the studio with me. It's partly because the theory that comes from Head Biotech is very, very controversial, and Head Biotech as an entity itself is also extremely controversial. And it's absolutely crazy, controversial. If I'm to be perfectly honest, it is. But the worst part of it all is that I've been sitting and working on this theory for almost 20 years now or so. Yes, I published the first article in 2010, 2009, as soon as I graduated from St. Olav's Medical Hospital in Trondheim at NTNU. So I've actually been working a lot on this project, and now I've written a total of 7 articles on the topic, but it's always been more like a hobby, you know. It's mostly been just a hobby for me. But when it started to get serious, and when things really started to get serious, it was when I was noticing that, well, when I saw that, there's definitely something going on. I can also really sense how much interest there is for this theory out there, and I'm noticing a very significant difference, gradually more and more. There's been a growing amount of interest in it since the 2024 article, relatively speaking, that is. And really started with the 3rd article in 2021, because then I was able to, yes, I will. Well, where do you even begin here? It's so very difficult to say where one should start. But in 2021, then, the 3rd article I wrote, but I should first mention the 4th law of thermodynamics, which is the basis of the entire theory that I introduced in 2010. That is to say, the theory is about good and evil properties in nature. So I come from biology. So for me, it's been natural for me to observe nature, what's good and what's bad in nature, and what is truly awful, or is it not awful, and so on. What the 4th law of thermodynamics suggests is that good and bad qualities in nature are significant for nature and even to the universe. The point is that nature itself determines the distinction between what is good and bad qualities, and that it has to do with thermodynamics, meaning the energy context. So broadly speaking, one can say that when there's a constant abundance of energy, Then life can eliminate nature's chaos, and that is what negative characteristics are supposed to do. What you can actually say is that the prime mover behind producing good and evil is the energy context, because it influences chaos. To remove chaos in the universe, you first need having a constant supply of energy, and that's also where the second law of thermodynamics and entropy enters the picture.
The second law of thermodynamics is an established law. It has something to do with entropy or chaos, because chaos starts with thermodynamics. In this case, it means the universe is a place with a finite amount of energy. That's what generates chaos, which means we can't stop chaos or entropy in the universe. What truly drives entropy, the law of entropy, has something to do with energy context or thermodynamics, if you like. And we are unable to stop the chaos simply because it is governed by the fact that the universe itself is a place with finite energy. But when life forms in the universe start to become intelligently advanced at some point in evolution, they manage to tame nature and reverse that energy context locally. Suddenly we have an abundance of food, don't we? Suddenly we actually have 10,000 tons of excess food. And then something significant will happen in nature, according to my theory, because then, until that very moment, evil qualities should have been completely dominated by good ones due to the chaos. So it's about the good qualities that always rise to the top and always move forward in nature, you know. It's a very biological, Darwinistic perspective, but with a positive twist, even though it might look terrible, which I completely agree with. Sometimes when I'm watching nature, I just can't bear to look at it. I simply switch the channel because I find it so gruesome to watch. But if you just isolate that part and analyze it, they don't do it because they are evil. They don't do anything bad on purpose, for example. It's totally brutal and everything. And so ice cold and all that. But they don't take any more time than is truly necessary. That's the small comfort that usually in the wild, things happen very quickly. And for instance, with venomous snakes, it's almost as if you're given an anesthetic. And if you then consider tigers and lions and such, they go straight for the throat to choke you because they just want the prey to die as quickly as possible because they can get injured if the prey starts to kick and so on. So they can't really afford to be evil. In principle, if someone in nature has started to think, now we're going to spend time and resources tormenting this prey. Perhaps evil traits in nature have been given a chance because you could say genetics is a stochastic process. So all different traits seem to have been allowed to try themselves out. It's a kind of stochastic randomness. Basically, that all possible random traits have been given a chance in nature. So theoretically, I imagine that sometimes evil traits have been allowed to emerge and test themselves, but they have disappeared because they consume more energy than the good traits. And that's what we can observe in nature. There are actually good who dominates, no evil traits, not systematically pure evil traits can be seen. And Head Biotech then uses ants as a model, as the biological proof, as I call it, for the fourth law of thermodynamics, because you see the ants, they haven't accumulated evil either, and you can compare them to us. It's totally brutal and all, but you see that they cooperate. They're not greedy, for example, and they don't really bother anyone. When they come across prey, they just eat as quickly as possible and then just move on, you know. They don't put any thought into it. So it's just to prove that since ants always have operated in nature in chaos, they've never had constant abundance of energy. They've never had the means to afford to create any state apparatus and remove chaos. So they really have been forced to be nice. And the ant, you know, has been around for much longer than us, much longer than us. And even how many million years? Yes, how many? I remember it's some million years. Maybe it was 100 million years. I will check that up afterwards. But the point is that the essential point to consider is that the ants still displayed absolutely no indication of having accumulated any truly malevolent or inherently bad characteristics. Indeed, quite the opposite is true. They exhibit signs of developing good qualities, namely solidarity. They help each other, sacrificing themselves for others. So there's a lot of that. Yes, you could simply call the ants models of good conduct. And that's the theoretical background to the Paradise Machine model and the background to head biotech. But how this theory, the fourth law of thermodynamics, ended up me being here to cover this splashdown. For that, I have to refer you to the pilot episode. Well, that's the thing about the Fermi paradox. So I believe I've had a new breakthrough here as well. But the foundation for it all began back in 2010 with the first article. But the theory has evolved, especially from 2021 when the third article came, because that was perhaps the first small real breakthrough. I noticed a little interest out there, and that was because I then saw that the fourth law of thermodynamics, this principle in nature, which I had already written about in the first article, this could explain what we observe in wave-particle duality during quantum mechanical experiments. Experiments show that when humans observe a quantum wave, it appears to collapse into a particle form. And also this phenomenon of the delayed choice quantum eraser effect. It seems that when we know something, nature also seems to know that the quantum world knows when we plan to observe it even so. But that's another story. The point is, it was a small breakthrough. But then came the fourth article published in 2024, and that was the article that truly launched the Paradise Machine model and the approach theory. And that's really when things started to get completely, utterly crazy. But that's exactly what I'm saying, just as Avi Loeb often says as well. Yes, let's just see what's going on here. NASA's broadcast is probably starting here now.
The Artemis 2 mission is a test mission of the Orion space capsule.
On December 19th, 1972, at precisely 2:25 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the Command Module America successfully splashed down in the vast Pacific Ocean, carrying astronauts Gene Cernan, Ron Evans, and Jack Schmitt aboard, marking the conclusion of the historic Apollo 17 mission, and with it, the final chapter of humanity's initial series of expeditions to the lunar surface. Today, at this very hour, you are looking live at our beautiful planet from the Integrity spacecraft, which is heading for a splashdown in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of San Diego, just 1 hour and 35 minutes from now. And good day from the Artemis Flight Control Room here at the Johnson Space Center in Houston, where the entry flight control team is on duty at this hour, led by Flight Director Rick Henfling, joined on console with the voice you'll hear talking to the crew throughout the course of the day. That is Jackie Mahaffey, second from your left. Everything has gone extremely well as we are now closing in on the return of Artemis's brave astronauts from their incredible flight around the moon and that historic lunar flyby. This mission will culminate with a splashdown in the Pacific Ocean off the coast of San Diego, just 1 hour and 35 minutes from now.
And so with that in mind, we have an excellent starting point, and we can now continue with the procedure.
Honor.
You are currently observing a live view from inside the Integrity module. On the left, we see Reed Wiseman performing a friendly fist bump with pilot Victor Glover, who is positioned on the right, and situated down in the middeck area directly beneath their feet, fully suited up in their specialized launch and entry suits, are the dedicated mission specialists Christina Koch and Jeremy Hansen, representing the Canadian Space Agency. There are still quite a few important milestones yet to unfold before the splashdown, which is now just over 90 minutes away. Earlier this morning, the crew awakened at approximately 10:35 a.m. Central Time. They completed the final major maneuver of the flight, that being the return trajectory correction 3 burn. It was an 8-second burn that fine-tuned its trajectory to enter a corridor over the Pacific Ocean a short time from now. That will be the point of entry interface where the crew will reach the first traces of Earth's atmosphere at an altitude of 400,000 feet. The crew commenced their entry checklist procedures just after 4 p.m. Central Time. They then suited up in their specialized launch and entry suits and carefully conducted all necessary leak checks and are currently in the final stages of completing their entry checklist.
Instruction 115 of entry checklist SM separation ATP is go.
Is planned, caused by the interaction of our velocity with the friction of Earth's atmosphere. There will be a significant buildup of plasma forming around the vehicle, and this intense ionization will completely prevent any communications with the crew members on board and also hinder any receipt of crucial data by flight controllers here in Mission Control. That expected blackout period is specifically scheduled to commence at 6:53 and 54 seconds p.m. Central Time. Again, a 6-minute blackout that will finally come to an end if everything proceeds exactly as planned at precisely 6:59 and 55 seconds p.m. Central Time. At that specific point, we fully expect to successfully regain communications with the crew and achieve a complete reacquisition of all necessary data through the sophisticated tracking and data relay satellite system. We will be performing a series of roll maneuvers. These are computer commanded, designed to roll the vehicle gently to the left and then back to the right side. This action will effectively bleed off any excess energy as we approach our peak period of maximum velocity. We expect to reach a maximum velocity of 24,661.21 miles per hour, equivalent to about Mach 33, 33 times the speed of sound, shortly after we enter that blackout period. As soon as we exit the blackout period, naturally, we are entering into the more dense regions of the Earth's atmosphere, and then we begin preparations for the parachute deployment sequence. First, the deployment of 3 forward bay cover chutes that will pull essentially the top forward bay cover off the very top of the Integrity vehicle. That will be followed by the deployment of drogue chutes, and then the final deployment of a series of 3 main parachutes at 7:04 and 44 seconds p.m. Central Time. From this point forward, we are now just about 3 minutes, give or take, until the critical splashdown event. This splashdown is officially scheduled for 7:07 and 8 seconds p.m. Central Time, and it will occur at a very gentle speed of just 19 miles per hour. So to provide you with a clear understanding, at the precise moment when our craft begins its reentry into the Earth's protective atmosphere, we're hurtling through space at an astonishing speed, roughly Mach 32. Our eventual splashdown will occur at a relatively gentle speed, approximately 19 miles per hour. The G-forces that will build on the crew members inside Integrity will build to about 3.9 Gs. That is what is expected and what they have trained for and what the spacecraft is designed to support.
So now it's the US Navy, you see, that will be picking the crew up. And they even have divers and all sorts of specialized equipment. They have aircrafts as well, don't they? They're now monitoring the entire operation here, so absolutely nothing is left to chance. But the crucial point right now is that the Navy is currently standing by, fully prepared, within an approximate 10 kilometers radius of the designated splashdown location, just off the coast of San Diego. But after splashdown, they are getting closer and closer, right? And then there's the thing with them needing divers and to keep a distance, because it's about them having to have a safety zone, because other things can also come down. Debris, as it's called, can come down. Falling material can splash down together with the capsule. And if it hits someone, you must remember that it's coming in very fast. The speeds here are quite significant, so that's actually the reason they maintain a rather large safety zone at first. So they wait for things to settle. So altogether, it takes a full hour from splashdown when they land in the water until they come out. An hour before the crew actually comes out of the hatch. Now, one of the things is the security of the re-entry. But after a safe splashdown, it takes a little while to open that hatch from the inside. For those of you who were with us on episode 6, for those of you who participated, the 1st of April broadcast. Yes, for those who joined the April 1st broadcast, you surely remember when they closed the hatch just before launch to the cockpit, and now that's the same hatch that's about to open again, and we all remember it certainly took its time to close it. I'm wondering if they might have spent perhaps 2 hours sealing it up, so it's going to take quite a lot of effort to get that door open. There are some procedures they have to go through, so it actually takes an hour from when they land until they come out, and then they are transported in to the ship there and welcomed. And there are these expressions at NASA from the early days. They call the very first float the front porch. The front porch, yes. You see, it's like this. So it's a reception thing, a kind of raft operation, you know. And then they are transported to this very ship here, which I believe is where the interviewee is from right now. And then they'll go in for a medical checkup on that ship first. That's the very first thing that happens. And within the first 2 hours, all four, they've been in for a medical examination. And what happens after that, I'm not entirely sure. But I would imagine they'll go into some form of quarantine, things like that, I guess. Yeah, then about re-entry security. This is, after all, a question of security. When the rocket took off into the air 10 days ago, during the launch it was dangerous, but from what I've understood now, it's quite obvious that the launch was dangerous, but the way I've understood it now, it's this issue with the heat shield. The experts who really know what they're talking about, there has been quite a bit of internal conflict and strife within NASA itself, because during the Artemis 1 mission, Artemis 1, which was the uncrewed version of that particular mission, you see, they then encountered significant problems with its re-entry phase, specifically when it had to pass through the Earth's atmosphere. Remember this, it's coming in at 40,000 kilometers per hour, and it can do that because they are moving in a vacuum. That's what we also discussed last time. Well, let's just take a look back here, because now we're not seeing that beautiful model. Let's take a moment to see here. Okay, then we have to go all out. I'm just going to demonstrate it. I need to demonstrate. Let's take a look. There it is. That's the moon. There is the moon. So between here, it's just a vacuum in space. That's what so many, ordinary people perhaps don't really think about. It's that as soon as you get outside the gravitational field here of Earth, or any planet, then it is a vacuum. And when it is a vacuum, there is nothing that can stop the movement. So as that speed begins to increase, it practically requires no fuel at all. As we discussed previously, it genuinely doesn't require any propulsion fuel. Once it has successfully locked onto its precise position, it possesses the capability to journey all the way to the moon and then return without consuming even a single drop of gasoline, because it simply plays upon the powerful gravitational forces of both the moon and the Earth. Then it gets that slingshot effect back to Earth, but they initially achieved such enormous speeds because nothing stopped the rocket due to the vacuum. So when they launch with their powerful engines at the very beginning, the speed never ceases. Since there is nothing that slows down the initial momentum, that is precisely why it attains such incredible velocity, reaching speeds of 40,000 kilometers per hour. But the problem arises when they transition from the vacuum of space and enter Earth's atmosphere, because surrounding our planet there are various gases due to Earth's gravity, primarily nitrogen and oxygen, along with other particles, including greenhouse gases and such. And these originate from life, for example, and also from volcanic activity. The thing is, when the spaceships suddenly encounter particles that create resistance at these speeds, that's when the outer layer of the spaceship heats up to like 5,000 degrees and so on. That's half of how hot the sun is. That's what they're facing now when they are about to enter the atmosphere.
and that is what makes it so dangerous. So during Artemis 1, there was some problems with the shield. They do have protection, a protective layer, of course, around this module, the final module that has to pass through the atmosphere. So that's where the safety issue is. That's the whole thing there. Now, those who have more insight in NASA, they say that this re-entry is more dangerous than the launch was from Florida about 10 days ago. However, NASA believes they have fixed the problem from the Artemis 1 attempt. Back then, with Artemis 1, there were problems. In 2003, 7 astronauts tragically died during re-entry due to failure in the heat shield, because some of these particular tiles, this protective coating you see around on the spacecraft had sustained a small bit of damage. A tiny bit of damage is all it takes, so if it tears open there, that's when the 7 astronauts in 2003 died, and you might have seen it, and then you just see everything just explodes. It's completely impossible to survive that. So it's very critical that nothing goes wrong, that it's completely sealed. Because if it's not completely sealed, we saw what happened in 2003. But I still feel like I don't, I mean, they've had so much experience now sending up spacecrafts, so I'm not really that worried. But that's what everyone's talking about now, that there have been some problems with Artemis's heat shield. So there are some people within NASA who are not entirely satisfied with this, but the astronauts themselves, they have given their approval. The astronauts themselves are, of course, fully and completely aware of this situation, and they are quite comfortable with the solution. So mostly it's going to be a bit about that. It's mostly about that, the security issue with the heat shield. But now it looks like the splashdown will happen. If the splashdown actually takes place, it will happen approximately 10 minutes past 2. So that's the way it's going to be then. It's approximately an hour and a half to go, a little bit less than that now, actually. Then after splashdown, it's supposed to take an hour before they come out of the hatch. So I wonder if that is an important thing. It's most crucial to document that the re-entry went well. That's the critical phase here. And then just wait a whole hour for them to get out of that capsule might not be so crucial. I don't know if I'm really going to cover that in this stream. I could just sit here and talk about the theory and all that, but I mean, I think I should address the first season in the podcast. Now, yes, I can talk a bit about the podcast, because then I imagine this will be the last episode, episode 10. As mentioned in the beginning, I have decided to let the podcast platforms, Apple and Spotify, dictate how the episodes are divided, which means I'll go back and split the video versions of the episodes to the same.
Eventually, that is, I mean, I kind of don't do it next week or maybe tomorrow, but eventually that is the plan, at least then. And because I think that I don't want to, I feel like I've spent so much time discussing the background and all of that, and then the theory and the various perspectives and such. That's why I want to, I really want to wrap it all up in a way. I truly want to. I think we should call this the first season. So these 10 episodes, I'm calling them the first season because everything is centered on the Artemis 2 launch and the entire mission. Then now when they return and when everything is safe and sound, I feel that I'll just encapsulate all of that into one season, and then I'll simply wait. What I'd like, what might eventually become season 2 then, that would probably be as late as 2028, because the next Artemis 3 mission, that's actually next year in 2027, but then they're not going to, their main task is simply to practice the docking maneuver with the landing rocket before making its landing on Mars. My apologies, I meant landing on the moon, but the year 2028 is the scheduled time for their landing. provided that all goes according to the plan. But I must say this is quite a lot. They've taken on a lot here. If they actually manage to do this, I would be very impressed, especially considering the time limits. And that whole thing about Elon Musk supposedly going to Mars by 2029 or 2030 and all that. I don't know. I mean, I heard some rumors about it a few years ago, and now that I'm starting to really look into it more, I'm thinking, then they must be really in a hurry. But Elon Musk has said that his goal at least is to be buried on Mars, and that's what I believe, that if he lives to be, let's say, 85 years old, then he'll have about 30 years. 30 years to get to Mars, and that's fine, but not in like 5 or 6 years. Well, it looks fine on the drawing board, but that's my view. I'm incredibly impressed by what they achieve and so on. We see that just with the Artemis 2, that journey here, you get impressed. But as I said, to Mars, that's another thing. If this is the moon, then we're talking 350 meters away from this globe. And what a hassle it was to get there. But then Mars has to move 350 meters further away. So then they have to. I think they have the opportunity to launch. I think they only have that chance twice a year. I mean, that's the closest. When it's 350 meters away, that's when Mars is at its closest, which only happens twice a year now. But the thing is, we are on our way. That's the reason why this is such a historic event. For Head Biotech, for the approach theory, the Paradise Machine model, the Fermi paradox, and this so-called NASA curse, I'm starting to suspect that it might be an ongoing NASA curse. Well, I am truly incredibly impressed by everything they have managed to achieve. But yes, isn't that right? They are going to establish a base. The goal is to set up a base. They are not going to stop this time. That is what they're saying. That is why this particular thing, this situation right now, is so incredibly important for Head Biotech. It is because of this fact. This was the first time a human went, Artemis 1. That was uncrewed. So we launched a rocket to test the systems, to test the equipment, just without a crew. But on April 1st, for this mission here, that was the first time they sent humans along with the spacecraft. So that's how I see it then. Perhaps the very first step that mankind took, the moment humanity became involved in our universal exploration mission. Yes, I can actually take a look at those pictures from behind the moon now that I have a little bit of time, because there's a short waiting period before things happen at NASA. Can you hear me now? That's what I'm wondering about. Well, right here we can see the exact spot from which they were watching the moon, from these small openings, as we discussed last time. And I think it's the first time they've had windows like that. And here you can see, and this was, the greatest moment if you've seen any of their interviews, because after they came back, they themselves have said that this moment here, it was supposedly the biggest moment. It was apparently quite insane. You can really notice it in the interviews of the crew. You can definitely tell it from the interviews they conducted, how much the view from behind the moon meant to them, how this view was magnificent. Just take a look at that. Now imagine what it would be like to be all alone behind the moon in this very way. Yes, as I'm saying, it's quite difficult to imagine. Pictures probably can't truly explain it. That feeling of being on the other side, like being on another planet in the solar system. But I also mentioned how incredibly lucky these individuals were then. If they survive this journey, how enormously significant it truly is. And now they have also set a new human record for being furthest away from Earth. For these 4 astronauts, it truly has been an absolutely incredible experience. Yes, and also right here, this is the map. This section here is showing more specifically the exact location where they are going to land. I truly hope you all take this information in, just so you're aware that you're actually pay attention. So, okay, here we have Hawaii, and that's pretty interesting. I find this map here quite interesting because the map is truly quite interesting. I find the map interesting for several reasons. Firstly, this is where they make their entry. And here they're supposed to land outside San Diego. And here we have Los Angeles again. Here's Los Angeles and all that stuff with Jack Parsons and these people. This is murder and all these things discussed. Everything in the podcast is right here. You can say because we're staying in the same area all the time. It's just so incredibly strange. And then, in addition, that LA cap of mine that I've started to wonder about throughout the podcast. And the point I'm making is I'm actually sitting here with an LA cap that I thought was like a bit special. But now, I'm constantly wearing that LA cap in the show, and I'm using it for all it's worth. I've even made that new logo with the LA cap, so I'm not really going to. I'm just saying that I think it's cool. I think it's. Oh, maybe this could be yet another strange little thing. Wouldn't you say? So everything that's strange right now, well, that's a good thing, you could say. But it's important to, keep your feet firmly on the ground here. But we should remember that this should also be a bit amusing and a bit enjoyable too. So I shouldn't read too much into it. But it's also important not to completely dismiss it either. But it is something, isn't it? That's exactly it. What's the chance I'd be sitting with an LA cap? And here's Hawaii, and what's interesting about Hawaii, if you can clearly see Hawaii over there, that small group of islands positioned right next to the entry interface, just off to the left-hand side. This right here is Hawaii. And it was from this very spot that they discovered Oumuamua, the interstellar object Oumuamua. So that was a bit interesting as well, since it started the approach theory.
Choir.
Outstanding. Seats 3 and 4 are working on seat strap in now.
Houston copies.
Once again, as we start to close in on some of the major milestones, so the first one coming up in just 31 minutes.
And integrity, just confirming the LCG gas trap was able to be closed out.
Affirmative.
Copy.
Crew module, service module separation scheduled just 31 minutes from now. The key point of interest, of course, will be the performance of Integrity's heat shield. 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. On Artemis 1, as I think most folks know by now, we flew a trajectory known as a skip entry, in which we performed an initial dip into the atmosphere to bleed off some energy. Then we skipped out of the atmosphere and dipped back into the atmosphere before splashing down in the Pacific. But after the mission was over with, we noticed unexpected liberation of some of the charring effects on the heat shield known as AVCOAT. Before the flight, we had an opportunity to sit down and talk with Entry Flight Director Rick Henfling to get a perspective on what this all means and how the mission was redesigned to try to protect Integrity's heat shield to a higher extent. Let's take a look at that interview.
We expect to achieve velocities upwards of 36,000 feet per second. And in order to slow down to a nice, graceful splashdown in the Pacific Ocean, the flight crew is going to experience between 3 and 4 times the force of Earth's gravity. On Artemis 1, pressure buildup inside the char layer of the heat shield resulted in the char losses we saw. NASA established a Tiger team whose job was to investigate the cause of the problem and then make recommendations on how to fly the Artemis 2 mission safely and successfully. And so for Artemis 2, we are going to fly a profile that ensures the spacecraft will not see that same type of pressure profile. And so the char losses seen on Artemis 2 will not be like the ones that we saw on Artemis 1.
Rick Henfling indicated that the orientation of the spacecraft and the shortening of the distance of transit to the splashdown zone from the point of entry interface when we reach the top of the Earth's atmosphere, which will be coming up at 6:53 and 30 seconds p.m. Central Time, should do the trick in minimizing the deleterious forces against that heat shield that were noticed on the Artemis 1 mission.
We see a beautiful sunrise over the west coast of Australia.
Yeah, so they're discussing that very thing right now. That specific point that we've been talking about, it's about this problem they had, the concern they're facing regarding the heat shield. So, I mean, I have to say, you know, that whole thing about the crew and all that, I tried to say all along that I actually hope that, I really don't hope that if something were to happen with the crew and in relation to that, well, what I feel is, wait, I just need to finish one thing first. And that was that NASA are going to set up, they are going to set up bases on the moon. Now, it's so wonderful to demonstrate with the planetary model, the one I've spent such a long time setting up, let's say, if I can manage to get out here. I'll be keeping an eye on NASA's screen in case something happens. I'm keeping an eye out on NASA, so I'm keeping an eye on it right here. So if anything exciting should happen, then I'll be sure to go back in. Yeah, let's just see, because you know what I mean? They're supposed to go up to the moon, up here. About setting up bases, humans are to be moved to the moon. As I said, that's why this Artemis 2 launch became so crucial for the Fermi paradox and all that, because it's actually the official plan now. NASA and SpaceX has clearly stated it, but remember that the Chinese and Russians are also working on plans. The Chinese are also going to, but I'm not exactly sure what they're up to. Now it's NASA that has, so to speak, fired the starting shot. You could describe it like trying to break away from the others if this were a cycling race. Now you can just imagine that NASA has tried to make a move, and now they're going. And now there is no doubt what they are planning, since now the US just realizes that we must go. It's like thinking, let's pick up the pace here, or we're going to be left behind, because you must remember that it's extremely important who are the ones that ends up out in the universe there and actually takes over the universe. Because if, let's just say, for example, the Fermi paradox, if the solution to the Fermi paradox is that we are the only life form in the entire universe, even though many disagree with that, I'm almost entirely convinced that it's not the case. I'm almost 100% convinced myself. I believe that it must be other life out there. That there has to be another explanation to why we haven't encountered other forms of life. But theoretically, let's say we are the only life form in the entire universe. So what I was talking about last time, what I brought up last time, was that those who leave Earth and venture out into space, they are probably the ones who will take over the entire universe one day, compared to those who remain here on Earth. And they're not sending out the dumbest people.
No, that's simply not true. And then there is this small conspiracy with the smartest belonging in the Thelema sect, right? That's exactly it. Then we're back to Jack Parsons, who had such a high IQ, and the smartest people who are involved. So possibly that it's one of those, let's say, one of those truly awful things. I mean, worst case scenario is that it's one of those who are just super smart, are so smart that we'll never figure them out. Just like a dog, dogs can't figure out why we always have them under control. Why we always have them under control. The dogs don't really understand that, but we do, right? Because we have the food and water. And we put leashes on them if necessary, right? We have full control over the dogs, but the dogs don't really understand that. Well, if that is the difference here, then and now that is what is truly frightening. So with the Paradise Machine model, this is what I talked about, especially in the first episodes, particularly the first 3, and a bit in the 4th, but most notably the first 2. That's what I really came to realize, that, oh my goodness, what Jack Parsons and his group were doing. It's the Thelema cult stuff and that female demon and that thing about turning chaos around against nature. And then there were these things that were written in that Bible, which that Aleister Crowley had received from a so-called demon, wasn't it? That's like the absolute worst case scenario. It truly is the worst case scenario, because what I recognize, it's all the complete opposite from the Paradise Machine model. For example, especially with those women there, it's the same principle that there are women behind it who are controlling everything and so on. Just that then there are these horrible demon women behind the abyss. The abyss is such a terrible place, but in the Paradise Machine model, it's on the other side of the event horizon in black holes, and there are supposed to be paradise women with many children who just purely cultivate motherly love and the woman's care for children, the opposite from the Thelema sect thing. I'm not talking about, that kind of Thelema thing. It's just the opposite. That's how nature or the machine operates then. I see nature as being like a machine. This is how the machine generates love and intelligence. And people talk about it. That's the baby, the woman-baby theory, the woman-baby idea that is very central, because the woman becomes the most energy efficient, and even more so, the most effective way to produce maximum intelligence in the machine. But at the same time, they also reinforce that thoughtfulness towards the children. You could say it just reinforces all the good things about women. Now, I'm not saying that they are just like the women here on Earth and so on. But we can sense them. The theory states that we should be able to recognize them as like having a feminine nature. It's very positive and so on, but just so we're clear, the theory says we should recognize them as having a distinctly feminine nature about them. But she's supposed to be 100% intelligent and all that, but still, we should be able to recognize that little feeling we already know from right here on Earth, that we already know about. And that's absolutely logic due to the Fermi paradox. We are supposed to be related with them after all, aren't we? It's just that they're supposed to be, let's say, 10 billion years ahead of us in terms of their evolution. That's what I'm trying to convey. So now I mustn't forget what I was about to discuss. Because NASA are setting up bosses here, and that's the thing. We are alone, then it's those who go to the moon and beyond now, who complete this mission and are never stopped. then it's probably them who will take over the universe. And if it should turn out to be these clever people like the Thelema sect and so on, who are the complete opposite of the proposed Paradise Machine model, then that means I can almost say with near certainty now that is the very essence of evil. Because then if the Paradise Machine model is indeed correct, if my Paradise Machine model is truly correct, then that is actually evil, because everything is its complete opposite. It is, and even the fact that, for example, they require a constant abundance of energy and to eliminate chaos. So they are working against the entire universe, you could say, because I believe that the entire universe is programmed to reach its ultimate end in paradise. And that should also apply to our relationship with the children. And that's actually the worst part, that suddenly they have a motive to, because if it's also meant to be the opposite of the Paradise Machine model.
Because in the Paradise Machine model, okay, wait, NASA is still on this ship interviewing some military guy. That's the Navy ship standing by to pick them up, and that's the base. That's where they go for their medical checkup and so on afterwards. I'm just letting you know what's happening on the NASA live stream. I'm keeping an eye on it right here. Then it should also be the opposite, because in the Paradise Machine model, the baby is to have the highest status in the entire machine. They are the first in line to enter paradise, so to speak. And as I always say, if there are any children who might be listening to this theory, they don't need to think about it, they'll come straight into paradise anyhow, because actually almost everyone comes to paradise. It's just one question. There's just one small concern. It's this idea of the zero risk signal. I mean, according to the approach theory, someone is supposed to have achieved zero risk in the struggle for existence. But it's supposed to be so extremely difficult to achieve that. It's a completely unnatural and artificial condition, because then you need to have. It must happen through a government apparatus, and I suspect that this has actually happened in Norway, that signal was triggered and sent from Norway. Yes, I'm just keeping an eye on the situation from NASA. There's still an interview being broadcast from the warship out there, and then there's a picture coming from inside the cockpit. Yes, I can imagine they're feeling quite stressed inside the cockpit right now. We really must take that seriously. And then we must also be allowed to speculate on this matter, and that's why this is so incredibly important when I see things like that with NASA, which I just have to say, why? I don't like it all. There's something about NASA. There's something about NASA that I don't like, and it has nothing to do with the crew. The crew is absolutely wonderful, and they are truly professional. It has nothing to do with them, but there's something going on behind the scenes at NASA that I don't feel entirely comfortable with. And that third main base for NASA is actually located in Washington, in addition to the one in Florida, where all the launches take place. And then, of course, you also have Houston in Texas. But then you have the actual, the NASA headquarters, the very headquarters of NASA. That's Washington, D.C., of course. And that's probably where these reptiles are, isn't it? I mean, if you understand what I'm saying. If it's those who are pulling the strings and are more involved with the cover-up, it starts to become about how they're supposedly inviting children onto spaceships, because then, well, those who are involved in these psychological manipulative schemes. But as I said last time, what I'm guessing is that they are actually absolutely terrified of being stopped. Now, I'm not saying they're like Telemark in that way. I'm just saying generally, because of what we've learned from the Fermi paradox. Yes, I'll just have to keep a little eye on the clock here. Yes, it's now about an hour until splashdown, so now it will separate. Yes, that module will separate. It's an important moment. Let me see. I'm going to have to spend a little time on it. I mean, it's so time-taking to follow this because it takes like an hour for something small to happen. Everyone has to wait an hour for them to flip a switch or something like that. But what's going to happen now is that they are going to separate the service module from the splashdown capsule. The capsule, which is meant to go through the capsule, which is meant to take the crew and the cockpit through the atmosphere, while the service module is just going to burn up in the atmosphere. So they're not even going to try and save it, so they're just going to ditch that service module, but they will then have to separate the two first. Well, it's a moment. That's what it is. It's a critical moment, so I'll need to keep a careful eye on it, but as long as they're still interviewing the captain or whoever it is out there on that warship, I'm going to assume that nothing has happened yet. Right. Well, I'm not saying it's Washington or NASA itself in Washington, but if that's the stuff I'm reacting to, it probably comes from NASA's headquarters in Washington, D.C. And there's a lot of politics involved there, and it's these people, you know, I mean, they call them the villains, don't they? That whole deep state and the swamp and all that. But they're only human. I just say it all the time. It's not possible for humans to be truly monstrous yet, because we simply haven't had the chance to fully evolve into that, quite frankly. We've only had, and as I've mentioned previously, we've only possibly had the time to become so evil that we could trigger the zero-risk scenario. So nature will simply never allow us to reach further from that point. The machine is designed so that no life forms in the entire universe can be permitted to become more evil than triggering the zero-risk signal. That is the whole Paradise Machine model, and then the Fermi life form moves. And that is the approach theory. And that is approach theory, but the Paradise Machine modeling itself, it just says that there's such a trap, you could say, in the quantum world somewhere that can measure if there's zero risk with evil intent, because then the machine must wake up, otherwise they'll end up in hell if they don't stop it at some point. But with zero risk, they haven't really had the chance to become truly awful or to become extremely evil. It's probably true that many people might find it cool to believe they're super evil and all that, but you know, you just have to apply a little bit of pressure and then they're not evil anymore, right? I mean, if you understand what many people are like, there are probably many who like to believe that they are evil and such, but actually they're not evil, are they? So, as I see it, the boundary is crossed by triggering zero risk and simply just triggering the zero risk trap, you know, and then that's when it comes. It's the approach theory. So, but still, I can't guarantee that theory. It's just a theory, but I will say that let's say it's not right or anything, then I think it's an important debate though to have this debate here. Because let's say I'm right and somewhat right, for example, right? In theory, we could actually be risking releasing a demon cult out into space. A cult that's supposed to take over the entire universe. It's just so incredibly idiotic, but to even say something like that. But in theory, that's exactly what it is, if that whole conspiracy theory about Thelema and all that is true. Yes, and then the plan is to establish a base up on the moon. Yes, I wonder if we should check out the NASA stream now. See what's up there. Yes, okay, that right there. That's the ship, and that's where the doctors are located. They are scheduled for a medical checkup. 2 hours after splashdown, all 4 must have had a medical examination. So now they're going to have to keep a distance, a Norwegian mile. Something like that. Yes, from inside that Thelema meeting, as I usually say, just as a joke. Every single time they show us images from the control room, I tend to joke and say it's like it's coming from inside the Thelema cult, you know, in a worst-case scenario, right? I fully understand that it's not actually that, but it just feels that way sometimes. I mean, I truly believe it's important to, like, float the idea and bring up the words, you know, Thelema is perhaps Thelema, just the very act of imagining it, because that's what the fifth article states. Let's see, get the sound on.
Performed flawlessly throughout this flight. Everything, all the burns that had been prescribed for that service module have been executed on time and without a problem. There is the European flight control room that has overseen the manufacturing, the design of the European service module. They deserve quite a bit of credit on this mission for not only propelling the Integrity and its astronauts toward the moon, but also conducting the fine-tuning of its trajectory to bring it to this point where we are dead spot on down the middle of the corridor trajectory-wise to bring Integrity down for its splashdown in the Pacific just 44 minutes from now.
So they are a little bit ahead of schedule, a few minutes ahead of schedule, it seems.
Yes, I'll just go and get myself another coffee.
What you're looking at is a computer-generated visualization based on real-time telemetry from Integrity, currently traveling about 16,000 miles an hour. Integrity traveling about 16,000 miles an hour.
For the prop cautions, we're taking a look.
Copy that.
Now just about 5,100 miles from Earth. Splashdown scheduled 43 minutes from now. We're just 9.5 minutes away from the crew module service module separation. We are confirming.
Integrity, we are assessing details, but so far looks like a good hot fire.
Looks good on board, Jackie. Thank you.
And Jackie Mahaffey took the words out of my mouth. I was just about to say that we had a good hot fire test of the thrusters in advance of the crew module service module separation that's coming up just 8.5 minutes from now. This will begin the period in which we will have rapid-fire succession of critical activities on board that will lead to entry interface just 28 minutes from now, where the vehicle will enter the Earth's atmosphere at an altitude of 400,000 feet. The time of entry interface, 6:53 and 30 seconds p.m. Central Time. Integrity's astronauts were awakened at mid-morning to begin their entry preparations. And propulsion officer now reports a good hot fire test in preparation for the crew module service module separation. We're now inside 41 minutes until splashdown.
Integrity Houston, we have confirmed a good CMRCS hot fire. And although we are not seeing GPS acquired yet, you can skip the troubleshooting steps in 157 for now.
Integrity copies.
That GPS discussion indicating that we will be acquiring navigational data for Integrity through the Global Positioning System equipment on board. We just don't have it yet, but we will. All of Integrity's systems are in great shape to support its high-speed entry into the Earth's atmosphere. It, once again, will reach a peak speed of 24,661.21 miles an hour.
Oh, GPS. We at least have GPS 1 looking good on board.
We are confirming.
The Guidance, Navigation, and Control Officer here in Mission Control confirming that we have good lock on GPS data. We are on a communications link now through the Tracking and Data Relay satellite system. Now, following splashdown, we're going to lose that link and go to what's called a VLDR, a very low data rate communications link, so that we can talk to the crew inside Integrity as they are on the water.
Integrity, confirm we do see good GPS.
We do too, especially GPS 1 is accepting in nav channels 1 and 3.
That GPS data is basically telling Integrity's onboard computers its position relative to the Earth, but its trajectory and its orientation according to flight dynamics, and the Guidance, Navigation, and Control Officer is spot on.
The split is about to happen. Now we must pay attention.
We have announced considering the other side of those for the crew module service module separation.
I must also consider the actual event here, and it's happening right now. This is one of those moments. Now the service modules comes off in about 5 minutes, let's say in about 3 minutes. Then the extremely important thing is that the service module must separate from the entry capsule that will continue to pass through the atmosphere. The service module, it will just be cast aside and will simply burn up in the atmosphere.
And then there is this particular point, at this very moment, it is reaching its maximum velocity. So, as he mentioned, during the first 10 seconds, when it starts to enter the atmosphere, it has its maximum speed. But then the slowing down process begins. Keep in mind, it's now going from 40,000 kilometers per hour. Then it will actually have to go down to zero ultimately. But it's those 6 minutes there within the atmosphere where the temperatures are half of the temperature on the sun. Yes, it's about 5,000 degrees, or rather it's around 3,000 to 5,000 degrees. Yes, isn't that right? It's like 3,000-4,000 something around there. Then it becomes a complete blackout. That's exactly what happens every single time. And so that is extremely critical. But do they then come out on the other side after that and manage to regain contact with Houston? Then you could say that's when it happens. Then it's just how it is. Then the parachute has to deploy and so on. After that, it's almost like we're down to the risk of a parachute jump, you could say. And I believe it's every 40,000 parachute jumps that ends in tragedy. So that's where the risk lies, you see. Yes, if they actually makes it through that very last entry phase there, then I would argue that it's practically 100% certain that they would have survived this. But seriously, what I'm saying and what I've been saying all along, I wouldn't have dared that. I would never have gotten into this rocket and gone after anyone there. Well, I suppose we'll just have to wait then. Yes. Yes, and I'll just step back because now we really need to want to pay attention here. And now this separation, we're about to get confirmation that the separation has been successful, and that's what we're waiting to hear now.